Howdy, everyone. I'm Nestor Lecanto from KUAM News, and I'll be your moderator this morning. Welcome to the second session of the Docomo Pacific Work Better Together webinar series. Thanks for joining us today on Docomo Pacific's Max Meeting video conferencing platform. As a thought leader and innovator in the telecommunications industry in Guam and the Marianas, Docomo Pacific will be hosting a series of webinars with the goal to connect leaders, experts, and decision makers to address current topics and issues and to provide effective approaches and solutions to these challenges. Today's session's theme is Diversity Now, Growing Our Economy in 2021. Global tourism has been hit the hardest by the COVID-19 pandemic, and the island's top economic driver has been severely crippled. Now, more than ever, there is a fundamental need for a third leg in the economic stool to support and safeguard the growth and development of our island's future. In this webinar, we will dive deeply into how ever-evolving technologies can be the catalyst for the creation of new and sustainable industries for Guam and the CNMI and enhance the lives of its people. Diversifying the economy in 2021 will help island economies navigate through uncharted waters and rebuild for a stronger future. And now to the agenda. Docomo Pacific has brought together a high-level panel for today's 2-hour webinar. Each of our 6 speakers will present for 15 minutes. We allocated a few minutes after each for a few questions. We encourage you to ask questions through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We'll try our best to get to as many as possible. We will also email a link after the webinar where you'll be able to download the PowerPoint presentations. And before we get to our first guest, I need to mention our prize giveaway. I'm pleased to announce that at the end of the webinar, Docomo Pacific will have a raffle for the latest innovation in air purification technology, Aura Air. Aura Air is the world's smartest air purification system that cleanses and disinfects your indoor air while vigilantly monitoring its quality in real time. So be sure to stay around for that. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our first guest. She will be speaking on accelerating growth through exponential innovation. Raya Bidshari is a serial entrepreneur, author, futurist, and keynote speaker. As the founder and CEO of Awe Academy, Raya is one of the world's leading experts in alternative models in education, the future of work, and exponential innovation. She has been featured by the BBC as one of the 100 most influential and inspirational women globally, and is a member of the BET Global Education Council. Raya has been described as a techno-optimist, a communicator of popular science, and an advocate of curiosity, critical thinking, wonder, and awe. Please welcome Raya Bidshari. Raya, it's all yours.
Thank you, Nestor. Hi, everyone. Good evening or good morning. For me, I'm really excited to be here. And what I'd like to start talking about, and I think we need to get my slides up shortly. Thank you. So what I'd like to talk about today is obviously accelerating growth through exponential innovation, but specifically what I want to focus on is mindsets for exponential innovation. Often we believe that innovation comes down to skills or competencies, technology, and funding. While all of those things are important, I've seen from my experience that one of the things that mainly hinders true innovation is often the way we think and the way we perceive the world. So today I'd like to go over a few of the mindsets that have allowed me to be innovative and I often see as a trend across truly innovative companies. Having a bit of a lag here. Let's see if the slide could change. There we go. All right, so I have lived in a lot of cities globally, but I grew up in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates. Now, for those of you who might be familiar with Dubai, it's particularly known for its incredible pace of change. Now, Dubai has a lot of parallels to Guam in the sense that, like you guys, it's a sense of urgency to diversify its economy. And growing up in Dubai really has a shift in your mindset and a shift in your perception and expectation of change. I mean, I've seen Dubai go from literally being a desert growing up to diversifying into the knowledge economy, research, education, technology. They're launching entire innovation hubs to to provide support for startups in the region, and so much more. And what I've noticed about Dubai, it's not just that they have the funding, or it's not just that they have access to capital, it's the way that the leadership thinks, and it's the mindsets that they have. So one of the things that characterizes true innovation from my perspective is exponential thinking. When we talk about exponential, we often throw it around as a buzzword, and very few of us truly understand what it means. So I'd like to spend some time here actually going through what we mean by exponential thinking. So our brains are wired to think in linear terms rather than exponential terms. But there's an analogy that I like to use that helps. So imagine if you were to take 30 linear steps, with each step being 1 meter in length. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. By step 30, you would be 30 meters away. It's very easy to predict where 30 linear steps will take you. That's how we've been thinking for thousands of years. Now imagine you were to take 30 exponential steps, where each time your step doubled in length. So that's 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and so on. How far do you think you would be by step 30? Well, the answer is actually 1 billion meters away. That's the equivalent of 26 times around the planet. It's surprising because we're not wired to think in that way. But that's what we mean when we talk about exponential thinking. But above all, that's the rate at which our technology is advancing. Moore's law shows us that our computing power has been doubling every 12 to 14 months. So the smartphone that most of us have today is 1 million times smaller, 1 million times cheaper, and 1,000 times more powerful than the most powerful technologies that we had about 50 years ago. So a child today in Africa with a smartphone has more powerful technology than the heads of states did 25 years ago. And that is the kinds of mindsets that we need to adopt, is that kind of accelerating change moving forward. Imagine what exponential change will bring about 25 years from now. And what's fascinating is that the computers being used to make the computers are also on this exponential trend. This is known as the law of accelerating returns. Ray Kurzweil has coined this term, and he says that's the reason that in the next 100 years, we will see 20,000 years worth of technological progress. So all of in our lifetimes need to prepare ourselves for 20,000 years worth of technological progress. So you're probably wondering, how could we possibly keep up? It can seem daunting, it can seem overwhelming, it can seem like it's impossible to possibly keep up with this pace of change. And that brings me to the next mindset, which is moonshot thinking. Now, moonshot thinking was a mindset, a mental model rather, that was put forward by Google's moonshot factory called Google X. So Google literally has a unit that does moonshot thinking and comes up with moonshot ideas. And their premise is very simple. Instead of a 10% improvement on the status quo, every time you innovate, you should have a 10 times improvement. That's the only way we'll actually keep up. It's based on this premise that incremental changes are not enough, and we need to 10x our systems, our solutions, our efficiencies with every round of innovation that we do. Now, a few of the examples of projects and prototypes that have come out of Google X include Loon, internet beaming balloons, the Everyday Robot Project, which is a robot that can learn how to do things on its own autonomously in new environments, Waymo, self-driving electric cars, wearable technology such as wearable augmented reality contacts, drone delivery systems. And now you can see a trend here. Google believes that these moonshot ideas lie at the intersection of a huge challenge, a radical solution, and breakthrough technology. But I actually challenge Google's definition. I don't believe that moonshot thinking only applies to technology. In fact, I think we need moonshot thinking in our regulations, in our ethics, in our organizational systems, and beyond. So something to think about is all the layers through which we can actually apply systemic moonshot thinking. Google also points out that a core part of their moonshot thinking process, and this brings me to the next mindset, is embracing failure. Now, I want to show a video. as I talk through this. Now, most of us have heard of SpaceX. They recently did their second successful trip to the ISS, taking American astronauts to the ISS. And we know SpaceX as a frontier for reusable rockets and innovation in the space industry. But what many of us often forget, or maybe we don't even know, is the amount of times they failed before they succeeded. Here you have a compilation of all of SpaceX's failures. Each of these failures cost them millions of dollars of funding, while they received a lot of skepticism from leaders in space like Buzz Aldrin, NASA, and all this time they kept going. And what I want to highlight is SpaceX wasn't doing the same thing again and again and again. That would be insanity. Each time they learned from their failures. They saw it as an important experimental process or step towards innovation. And and they believed it was worth it because their massive transformative purpose was to make humanity an interplanetary species. And they knew that if they cracked this, the cost of space travel would reduce dramatically and put them on the path to taking humanity to Mars. So as Elon Musk has said, if something is worth doing, you do it even if the odds are against you. And he's also said that if you're not failing, you're not innovating enough. And I think it's an excellent case study of the kind of mindset we all need to embrace. Doesn't matter whether it's in the space industry. I mean, I know Guam, there's prospects of Guam becoming a spaceport, but think about this metaphor within your own industry and within your own small business and all the ways you need to ensure you fail before you succeed. And of course, they've had a 90% success actually since 2016 in successful launches. So I also serve as a board member, as a youth board member to a couple of corporations here in the UAE. And one of the things that has always amazed me is this the propensity for low risk towards the older generation. And more often than not that I've seen that people identify challenges where things go wrong and they see that as a reason not to do the project or not to move forward with it, with a strategy. Whereas I like to perceive it is map out all the ways things can go wrong and actually see those as obstacles that need to be overcome in return. And this is where risk-taking is actually a skill that I think can be improved on. It involves identifying all of the negative outcomes in advance, establishing solutions to those potential negative scenarios, weighing out the potential for positive scenarios, and continuing to learn from failure. Remember when I pointed out that SpaceX wasn't just doing the same thing again and again. They were learning through an iterative process. That brings me to the next mindset. I'm a neuroscientist by trade, and I've often appreciated the role of scientific thinking, not just within science, but across all discipline. And this particularly relates to what we call evidence-based innovation. One of my favorite frameworks for this is the lean cycle, which some of you may have heard of. The lean cycle was put together by someone named Eric Ries. He saw that 97% of startups failed, and millions and billions of funding every year is wasted on these failed startup ideas, and not to mention all the time, emotional energy, and resources that have gone towards those ideas. And he thought, what if there was a better way of doing things? What if we had a framework or a process where we actually tested and validated ideas before investing millions into them? And that's basically what the lean cycle involves. It involves building what we call a minimum viable product, which is the basic version of your product using minimum features, putting it out in the market very quickly, learning from the data that is gathered, and reiterating that process. So instead of spending a year developing, let's say, an entire software and then taking it into market, start with one or two features, get them tested, get validated, and then continue this iterative process. Now, this process was initially designed for startups, but I believe even larger organizations and companies can learn a lot from it. Often we assume things about the market. We assume we know what customers want. But what if we actually identified our assumptions, developed the hypotheses, and tested our assumptions for ourselves as well? And that's really, in many ways, a scientific process applied to innovation. And I really, truly believe in the power of this. Now, the next mindset I'd like to cover is that of optimism. I know we're living through crazy times, and now more than ever, it's very difficult to be optimistic. But as hard it is to believe, we're actually living through the best time in human history. Now, in the last 100 years, we've seen a 100% increase in life expectancy, a 100% decrease in maternal mortality and infant mortality. We've dramatically increased our access to goods, services, education. We've seen continuous improvements in IQ across all around the world, known as the Flynn effect. We're living through the longest period we've ever gone in the history of our species without the world's greatest powers going into war. There is a lot of cause for celebration, and that's ultimately what intelligent optimism is about. It's about being optimistic in a way that is rational, well-reasoned, and based on evidence and based on statistics and data. And of course, to say that the world is getting better does not mean that it's perfect. There's a beautiful quote from Steven Pinker, who's cataloged human progress and the decline of human violence over the years. He says that progress does not mean that everything becomes better for everyone all the time. That would be a miracle. And progress is not a miracle, but problem solving. Problems are inevitable, and solutions create new problems which have to be solved in return. I think this is a quote that beautifully applies not just to human progress, but also actually to the process of innovation, to the process of entrepreneurship. It's constantly about problem solving and constantly about iteratively improving what we have. I'd like to wrap up now the talk with talking about exponential organizations. Now, exponential organizations is a really powerful framework. EXOs, for short, as we call them, represent organizations that are growing 10 times or 100-fold more rapidly than the traditional so-called linear organizations. And on the screen, you can see the framework that exponential organizations often use. So the team that actually cataloged this framework studied the top 100 Fortune companies and actually looked at what it is that they're doing, what are the Instagrams, the Ubers, the Airbnbs doing right that is disrupting the traditional status quo. I won't go over every single one of these, but for a few of the notable examples include leverage assets. Airbnb became the largest hotel chain without owning any hotels. You have algorithms, Twitter, Facebook, Netflix, all of these tech platforms use algorithms to personalize their solutions to their users. Interfaces, Google Ads revolutionize advertising by developing an automated interface that users could set up ads with very little manual control. UPS, that does millions of deliveries in the US alone, uses algorithms to save it millions of dollars in inefficiencies. So these are just some of the few examples, but I think Exponential Organizations is an excellent book I'd recommend. And this is an incredible framework to use and a proven framework to use when it comes to developing groundbreaking, disruptive, and innovative ideas. Now, the final mindset for today is critical thinking. Often I've seen our minds are the source of the problem. It doesn't matter what kind of funding we have. It doesn't matter what kind of technological tools we have. If we're not able to reason and use our logic and think critically, it all falls into pieces. Now, under critical thinking, we like to talk about cognitive biases and logical fallacies. Cognitive biases represent kind of heuristics, mental biases in our minds and the way we perceive the world, while logical fallacies represent irrationalities in argumentation. Now, there's tons of biases and logical fallacies. I won't go over all of them, but what I often recommend is the process of metacognition. Metacognition is thinking about thinking. So how often do we sit back and actually analyze our thoughts to think about what we think? And that's a critical part of critical thinking. Now, there's one bias I want to wrap up with today, which is the anchoring bias. Very simply put, the anchoring bias says that when we plan for the future, we often anchor things with a reference point of the latest information we've received. In a very simple term, in innovation meetings, the first ideas often anchor future ideas. But at a larger scale, the anchoring bias describes all the assumptions that we bring about something with ourselves. So I'll give you an example. In the education space, innovation is often hindered because people come in with preconceptions, anchors, and narratives about education. So a lot of schools, despite being innovative, actually still evaluate students by exams. They still do traditional subjects. They still organize classrooms by timetables, right? But what if we removed all those anchor points and said, what if we designed a system without exams, without subjects, without traditional timetables? What would that look like if we started from scratch? So I urge you to think about that with your own industry, whatever it might be. What are the anchors and the assumptions you are bringing with you from the old models? And what would happen if you mentally erased the outdated system and decided to build a new one from scratch? What would that actually look like? So I'll stop here. I know we're running out of time, but I urge you to think beyond the preconceptions. We're moving towards an exponential era, so move beyond what has already been done. Don't try to replicate examples of economies around the world, but try to identify challenges within the existing novel 21st century world and develop novel, groundbreaking solutions to them.
Thank you, Raya Vichari. Just a very fascinating, thought-provoking, and inspiring talk. I wanted to ask you, what stood out to me was you mentioned that Dubai parallels Guam in the sense that there's a need for a shift in mindset. As we mentioned in our intro, Guam has relied primarily on tourism and U.S. federal spending to drive our economy. And of course, the tourism industry has collapsed. So one of those legs that we have relied on for so many years is now gone. And I think there is an urgent need to diversify. We've talked about, for as long as I've been reporting on Guam, the government leaders have talked about diversifying our economy, but we got so comfortable, I think, using tourism and federal spending. So who should lead this shift in mindset? And what is the government's role? Should it be the government?
Absolutely. I do believe the government has to lead. I mean, here in the UAE, we've been very lucky, especially in Dubai. The prime minister is really a true visionary. I mean, a couple of initiatives they've set up. For example, they've set up an initiative called the Dubai Future Foundation. It's a government foundation. And underneath that, they have multiple projects. They have the UAE Centennial Plan, which is the 100-year plan for the country. They've set up an ecosystem of corporations, government entities, startups that collaborate together to get the UAE to those milestones within 100 years. But they also have short-term challenges, the Dubai Future Accelerators, which is actually a government-funded accelerators where they bring in startups from around the world across challenges to solve regional challenges, and they get them assimilated into the market there as well. As just a few examples, we have a Ministry of AI. We actually have a Minister of AI with a clear AI strategy. There's a national skills strategy. So really, I do believe the government kind of sets the standards, sets the pace for everyone else to follow. Without leadership, it's very difficult to inspire a movement at a national scale.
Should the private industry become involved in this?
So when do they become involved in this?
How should they become involved in this?
I think collaboration. I mean, in any industry, really rapid transformation doesn't happen with one silo of an entity. I mean, we're seeing this in the education space, building alternative models of education, which is the background I come from. You have to work with regulators, private industry corporations, government units, and other stakeholders at the same time. I think one of the key areas that private can support with, especially with the larger corporations, is in funding, is in participating in that process, whether it be through setting up venture capital firms that fund innovative projects that align with the agenda, with the national agenda, and whether it be through skills training for its staff. So there's a variety of ways, but ultimately it needs to be a collaborative effort.
All right, thank you so much. Fascinating topic, as I said earlier. Raya Vichari, appreciate it. Now moving on, our next topic is boosting economic growth through 5G connectivity. In April 2016, Zaif Siddiqui was assigned as an executive director of corporate sales and marketing division at NTT Docomo to develop and lead the global enterprise business. In July 2020, he assumed the role of global head of 5G, Internet of Things, to address the needs of enterprise clients. Prior to the current assignment, his professional contributions were at Vodafone Global Enterprise, Microsoft, and Verizon Business. It's our pleasure to introduce Zaif Siddiqui. Good morning, Zaif.
Hey, good morning and hello to everybody. Thank you very much, Nestor, for the great introduction. And I think also what Raya just mentioned, very, bringing things into context because the way we think is very important. And I think really going to be relevant in how we actually bring in the technologies together. And I think what she mentioned about exponential thinking, was just fantastic. And I think I'll be touching on those points together in my presentation following up. Guam, I would say very sad that we can't be there with this pandemic. I was looking forward to being there in March. Unfortunately, things have changed and the world has changed. And as we live in this new normal, I would say we have to change the way we think and how we get the most out of the digital transformation in this 5G era. So I'll be having this great conversation with you today, and some of the use cases will also be introduced, especially in the healthcare, by my colleague here, Fuyumi Kuwabara, who was supposed to be there. When were you supposed to be in Guam?
In July?
In July, and she's still here in Tokyo, waiting for the visas and everything to be arranged. Maybe she'll be talking later about how we're going to show some use case in the healthcare area. Okay, with that, I would like to give a little bit more of a technical, not too much technical, but keeping it economic, but bringing in the technical part as well to show you how digital transformation can help Guam, and I would say how it can help the overall economy to make sure that we have better lives in the future. And okay. So before we start, a quick snapshot of NTT Docomo. We are a 45 billion company, a $45 billion company. We do telecommunications. Our operating profit is at 8 billion, and the number of mobile subscribers that we have is #1 in Japan. We have almost a 40% share with 80 million subscribers. So for the people who just may not know who NTT Docomo is here in Japan, that's a quick snapshot. And what are the businesses that we do? I could have made this slide very complex and put all the more than 140 companies that we have. But I think to make it very simple, the blue part is the telecommunications business that we have been doing for the past 2 decades. And more recently, in the past, I would say, 8 years, Docomo has been spending a lot of effort in the smart life area. This is the part where the non-telecommunication businesses are to be grown, especially with the enterprise and not forgetting the 5G story. This is the new story for this planet. Many of you may be thinking, hey, I even don't have access to 5G. You probably may not even have a 5G phone. And you may be like, I never used it anyway. So what am I going to talk about 5G? It's something that we have to build, and I would like to share that story with you. So just for the benefit, real quick, I think it's important to define what 5G is. You can see some big numbers here. You get 1,000 more capacity than the current system. You get 100 times more higher data rate. You get massive connectivity, meaning like many devices can connect to the network at one time. On the right side, you see reduced latencies. So less than 1 millisecond, meaning it's going to be real time. And how does this really relate to our lives? And what does 5G really bring to us? So on a snapshot, these are some things. You could see you can have many devices at home, stress-free. You can have your transportation, in the trains, in the cars, which can be automated, especially for the autonomous driving. Your consumer electronics will be connected. Your jewelry, your watches, your cloths, these things will be connected as well. Sounds a bit scary, but it all depends on, I think, what you go back to what Raya was mentioning, the exponential thinking. If you think properly on how you can utilize these technologies, it can really change the way you do your work and bring new businesses, your houses, and a lot of sensors. And then, of course, streaming is here. We have different types of education now. We have remote learning, how we define safety and how we define our lifeline systems. These will all be, monitored in real time and bringing better services to our lives by the use of 5G and various technology, especially with having cloud computing where we can get everything done in the cloud in a very secure environment. And today we will have Fuyumi, who I just introduced earlier. We'll be talking about the healthcare use case once I'm done with my conversation with you. So why digital transformation in the first place? I think Nestor was mentioning about, tourism and government spending being the two pillars of Guam's economic building. But I would say if Guam takes in the right technologies in place, Guam and the CNMI has, I think, great potential to bring in trillions of dollars of benefit in various sectors. Because this is, and even if you take 1% of that, that is a very big number. And I think Docomo, together with the various partners, can contribute in building more businesses in the various industries. And not only that, where we talk about the digital transformation has a lot of benefit, we also need to understand what is the definition and what are the components of the digital economy. To make it very simple, we need to understand that people, businesses, data, devices, and processes. These are the 5 key elements of the digital economy. But all these components have to be supported by communications network, platforms, and the various services and technologies that we bring in. A very simple slide, but extremely important. You really need to know how people, businesses, processes, devices, and data, how they interact. And by understanding that and bringing in the right technologies, that's how you create the economic boom. And that's how you create new businesses. And when I talk about this, it reminds me of what the Japanese government is actually doing in the area of Society 5.0. Some of you may have heard about this, but if you have not, I'll just do a quick run through on a very high level note, because some of the Asia Pacific countries have already adopted this. And this is the plan that how we have evolved, not the plan, sorry, this is how the human beings have evolved in the past. And this is called the societal journey. So putting technology a little bit aside and getting back into those hunting and gathering days where, we did not have phones and TVs and all the gadgets, that was defined as Society 1.0. And then, of course, we started to go into the agricultural space, crops, getting the corns, getting the rice. These were the things that human beings used to do. And then we move on to the industrial, which is the Society 3.0. And that's where all the factories started coming in. We get the steam locomotives. And then the .com and the internet age is the Society 5.0, where we get an influx of information and people communicating with each other. But this is where we have come today. And we're at a point where we have so much of cutting edge technology and we have so much information. And we have these buzzwords like, data lake, and we say this big data, we've got AI. It may have actually confused a lot of people as well. And that's why it's the job of Docomo and Docomo Pacific to work with our partners to define and explain how we can make use of these technologies and how it can be implemented in Society 5.0. So the Society 5.0 and Docomo's vision actually align very well, because both the government of Japan and Docomo want how we define this Society 5.0 is to bring a high degree of convergence between the cyber and the physical spaces. Cyber meaning on the blue side where you see AI, and the physical spaces where you see devices. And the way we connect these two things will be done with 5G in the future. Currently, we have premium 4G services, and that is already reaching at a rate of about 1 gigabyte. However, with 5G, we can definitely reach more than 10 to 20 gigabytes, and that will create new services in banking, in, I would say, in agriculture, in the autonomous driving, and the smart cities. And then you may be wondering, well, hey, Zai, if you're telling me that you bring the cyber and the physical spaces together, are we saying that people will be losing jobs? Not quite so, because there's a prerequisite for Society 5.0. And I think this is also very relevant with what Raya was mentioning earlier, because digital transformation does not happen on its own. It has to come with the imagination and creativity of diverse people, especially at the top level. The people in the government, the CEOs of companies, leaders, managers, these people have to motivate to come up with ideas and creativity. And they have to put investment as well. Otherwise, problems cannot be solved and value creation cannot be achieved. And that's why it is also the stage where we're entering an imagination society. I think that is very important to understand, because if we lose this point, we get into this technological discussion and forget about how we can actually make the economic boom. So digital transformation here on the left, imagination and creativity on the right. If you could just remember these two for now, and we jump into digital transformation. How does Docomo define digital transformation? Digital transformation, we would say, is having IoT, cloud services, AI, and XR, all these various technologies, and keeping 5G at the core. So meaning all these technologies will be wrapped around 5G. And that goes back to that, cyber and physical coming together. And once we are able to achieve that, just as an example, we can have better user experience, come up with, innovative services, we'll have improved productivity, and this will be aligned according to industry and according to the needs of each enterprise and individuals. And then once that is achieved, we can solve the social issues. We can make new value creation. We can achieve these things. And this will be different for each individual and organizations. However, digital transformation, we must not forget that the government policies have to be well understood, and the market behavior needs to be well understood as well. So this is how Docomo defines digital transformation. And on the right side, if you remember, the imagination and the creativity. How does that come into play? So for digital transformation at Docomo, we have the Plus D initiative, and it's also called the Co-Creation Initiative, whereby our assets, Docomo's technology, our IP, together with Docomo Pacific, and I would say we've combined these assets with the enterprises' assets, our partners' assets, and the people in the ecosystem We work together with them and create a Plus D initiative. It could be in mobility, which is the autonomous driving. It could be in education, healthcare. And these are the ways that we have to come together and be very creative in how we solve the puzzle of bringing the right technologies together. And our goal is exporting this Plus D to APAC and Guam and CNMI. And we're already working very closely with Docomo Pacific. And we see this as a cross-border co-creation opportunity, whereby we can create, bringing Docomo's technology from here in Japan to Guam and CNMI. And this will be very important in accelerating digital transformation with the ecosystem partners in your region in the coming 5G era. So you may be saying, so great, you said that, Fuyumi can't go there, we can't talk to each other, then how do we do this? Well, I could see also behind Nestor, the background, you've got the Docomo 5G Open Partner Program as well. This is something which we have launched 2 years ago, whereby we bring our partners and we bring various partners, whether they're hyperscalers, whether they're small businesses, whether they're large businesses from various industries. And we talk about bringing how this program can help the people to implement our solutions in Society 5.0. We give access to 5G labs. We also provide information sharing on what 5G is. And most importantly, for the economic boom, as the economic growth that we want to create, the business camps. These business camps are extremely important because we have discussions for months, even to come up with the solution. There has to be tests done. We do trials. We have the POCs. Depending on the business that you do, you need to get government approvals for a commercial launch. So these things are not easy and take time. And that's why after spending over 2 years, we now have 3,500 partners in this program. And this is actually the monetization engine for 5G and digital transformation. If you don't spend the time and if you don't invest, you are not able to achieve the monetization. And that's why we have these, over 30 commercial solutions launched after spending such a long time with various companies. For one of them, which we will try to introduce in the healthcare. And Docomo has invested in the talent as well, where we have 5G masters. And hopefully we'll be having these 5G masters in Guam and CNMI as well to build opportunities. In Japan, we have over 500 opportunities in this area of 5G, and it will be increasing more and more. So with that, I come to pass on to Fuyumi, who will be explaining about the healthcare use case. And over to you, Fuyumi.
Okay. Thank you, Dai. My name is Fuyumi Kuwabara, and I started working as an expat of Docomo Pacific. Because of the current situation, I'm still in Japan, but with my years of experience with my Docomo's enterprise business. Now, I would like to introduce a case study of remote medical equipment training. This is a system to see a doctor's procedure with medical equipment from remote location. Say this is a training room with 360-degree camera and close-up camera. A doctor is demonstrating how to use equipment and showing his or her techniques and giving some tips for doctors, medical students, and other healthcare professionals. This procedure footage can be monitored via VR goggles using 5G network. Before I move on to some more detail, let's take a look at this slide to expand your imagination. Doctors on the left-hand side are giving medical practice lecture to the medical professionals on the right-hand side. And with 360-degree camera, the footage of the entire room is transmitted in real time, and trainees see procedure from the angle they wish to see. Since this is a real-time and two-way communication, doctors and trainee can have interactive session. Benefits from this system are, first of all, doctors, medical students, and any other healthcare professionals will be able to learn how to use medical equipment properly and its techniques without physically being there. Doctors are extremely busy treating patients, practicing surgery, and studying cases, and there is a large demand to cut the traveling time. And second, the combination of 360-degree camera and close-up camera enable you to focus on the frame of your interest. For example, the main doctor wants to focus on the view at hand, medical students want to see the entire flow, and nurses want to see the flow to support doctors. Third, since this system uses VR headset, you can feel as if you are at the training site and obtain multiple information with picture-in-picture technology. Within a virtual space, multiple monitors can be embedded, and you get to see patients' medical record, vital data, or X-ray. This is the proof of concept phase. However, NTT Docomo will be expanding this system for business use shortly. In the future, we're confident that we are being able to bring this system to Guam, where 5G Lab and Docomo Open Innovation Cloud is in place. Someday, doctors in Guam will be able to get the latest training from all over the world, including Japan. If you're interested in more use case studies, NTT Docomo is hosting an open house every year. This year, we had over 200 booths with full of new technologies and 5G use cases, had dozens of keynote speakers, and over 20,000 customers showed up. Around February of next year, we'll be hosting a virtual open house, taking consideration of current situation. I will keep you posted, and if you are interested in learning more of the technologies and use cases, please visit NTT Docomo's virtual open house. Well, now I'm handing to Zaif to wrap up.
Okay, that was great. Thank you very much. Okay, Fuyumi, thank you very much. I think we had a very great session around giving some information and having a great conversation around 5G and the digital transformation. Nestor, I think I'm already over time, but the key message, if you have not joined this program, please join now. I think that's the key message for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dave. I think you're going to generate a ton of interest because when you said trillions of dollars involved in this digital transformation, and we can get just a little bit of that, I think that piqued a lot of people's interest. So look forward to a lot of questions and interest in that. Thank you very much. We have to move on. We are a little bit short on time. Mr. Zaif Siddiqui and Fuyumi Kuwabara, thank you very much. Fascinating talk. Now I'd like to move on to our next speaker. His topic is Guam as the next business hub in Asia. Dr. Kenneth Choi is currently a professor of practice in business at the University of Guam. Prior to his UOG years, he was a professor of finance at Sejong University and was a registered investment advisor at Infinity Capital Management. He also has experience as portfolio manager and vice president at UBS Asset Management. Dr. Choi earned his PhD in economics and business administration from the University of Michigan. Dr. Choi, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning, all of you. I'll keep my talk brief, and let me start my talk with a simple question for all of you. Do you think you can change what you do for a living by changing your thoughts on who you are? Especially young people, think about this. Oftentimes people think of themselves, who they are, on the basis of what they do for a living, you see? But then the flow of causality can go the other way as well. Depending on what you think, who you think you are, you can change what you do for a living. Now, the point I'm getting at is that Guam can be more than just a military base or vacation spot for Asians. There's a great potential for Guam, and I'd like to bring your attention to some of the characteristics that Guam possesses and which will, I think, shape our future. So here's a picture of Guam. All we see is a beautiful beach, and it's a nice vacation spot, nice weather. Is that it, or something else? And my point is, Guam has a great potential to become an international financial center. Well, business center, but in particular, financial center. So let me consider some of the factors that determines, oops, how does it go? My screen doesn't move. I will go to the next screen, but, oh, there you are. If you're looking at international financial centers or business centers, this is a picture of Hong Kong, picture of the island of Hong Kong, viewed from, what is that, Guam Peninsula. So the original Hong Kong. It's a very nice place, right? So a place like Hong Kong, what does it have? And there are three sets of factors, not just the single factors, three sets of factors that determines international financial center, whether it is Hong Kong or Singapore or elsewhere. The first is connectivity. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Second is the rule of law. And third is the low cost of doing business. These three factors will determine the whether the city or place can be a financial center for the region. Okay? Now let's consider each factor in turn. Now connectivity, of course, means geographical nice location, geographically at a nice place. And it has easy access to your suppliers as well as your customers. Now you have a nice airport, you have a seaport. You might have noticed that Guam has both nice airport and seaport, huh? So it's something that going for Guam. Okay, so this is kind of geographical endowment. Okay, now let's go to the next factor. This is the second factor. It's a set of factors. This is the important thing. It's the rule of law. The first is you have to have property right has to be protected. And the application of law should be predictable. No arbitrary application of the law. That is key thing. Right? So you have your property is well protected, and you know the court system will work in a certain predictable manner. There's no arbitrary arrest by some secret police in the middle of night, like something happening in, let's say, a place like China. We don't want that. And another thing is, do you have, nowadays, intellectual property right is very important. Data is important. Are they well protected? That is another rule of law. And social stability. You don't want to have a place where there's a riot, looting going on, like some place in mainland, Minnesota, and place like. You cannot have a good business with that kind of thing going on. And also, to have foreigners, you have to have a certain visa policy that is predictable. So this is a set of factors that is under the rubric of the rule of law. So you have to have this rule of law is in the place. That is a prerequisite. Now, the third factor, or third set of factor, is the cost of doing business. Now, this is where time meets the road. Now, the first tax rate. You don't want to have a business where the tax rate is very high. Of course, if you have a choice, then you'll go to a place where the tax rate is lower. Singapore, for example, has a 16% corporate income tax rate. I think it's one of the lowest in the area. US, as you know, it is 21%. It used to be 35%, but President Trump lowered it 21%, but still it is higher than Singapore. And the next thing is, this is something you have to consider, currency exchange rate. Now, we live in Guam. You might have noticed that we use US dollars, so we have no problem with the currency exchange rate risk. But if you have a business in a place like Japan or Australia, now you have a problem. There's a currency risk, currency exchange rate risk. So how do Hong Kong and Singapore get around the problem? Well, they pegged their local currency to US dollars. So they eliminated that currency exchange rate risk. All right, they did that. But in Guam, we don't have to do that. It's already taken care of, see? The next thing is infrastructure. I think this is where Docomo comes into the picture. We need infrastructure, not just the highways and other things, but nowadays it is the internet system, right? Reliable internet connection and all that. High-speed 5G and all that. If Guam, I think Guam is a small place. I think we can have a really good internet service, 100% coverage, every place, top speed and all that. That is doable, you see. And the infrastructure is very key. without the infrastructure, you cannot have any business, right? And another thing is, as a part of doing business, is language. You see, if you have a business in a place like Japan, because of the language, there's a cost associated with that. You see, not only just that you need somebody who can interpret what you are saying, but also because of well, I guess it's obvious. I don't have to elaborate. So, language spoken by the local people is another cost of business, doing business. And again, Guam, as you might have noticed, we speak English. So it is another plus for Guam. See, as you might have noticed, places like Hong Kong and Singapore, their official language is English. You see, Singapore, for example, is mix of three races, right? Basically, Malay, Chinese, and Indian. And one of the things that Lee Kuan Yew did was in the 1970s was adopted English as official language. See, that made the business much easier. Okay? Hong Kong also, well, I guess they used to be British colonies, but the language is also a big factor. So you don't want to have a international business in place like Japan. That's too expensive in terms of doing business. Whereas Guam has this advantage, you see. Another thing is cultural thing, social trust, morality. Do people nice, or social moral is do people steal things? That kind of thing. I don't name places, but there are countries nearby where you don't want to go because the people are not all that friendly, you see. But whereas Guam, I think Chamorro people are very hospitable people, and the whole culture is very nice. So this is another cost of doing business. So we want to minimize cost of doing business for the businesses. And based on these three factors, I think Guam has great potential. Connectivity is very good. The rule of law is well established. And the cost of doing business is wonderful. I mean, so all we have to do, what's the next step, you say? Okay, we understand that Guam has things going. So what is the next step? Here's the thing. Oh, let me see if I can go to the next screen. There are, of course, things that we can do to make Guam even more enticing to international business. So corporate income tax rate, we can, and gross revenue tax. I'll talk more about that if I have time, but basically we can reduce those things. But here's the thing. We have to reach out to potential businesses to come to Guam. If you're a good-looking girl, then you have to flaunt your beauty. If you a guy with lots of muscles, maybe you can show off a little bit. Flaunting a little bit is not too bad. Let the people know that Guam is available. See, and that is the first thing you do. And the second thing is, then who is going to take the leading role? Now, some people say, "Oh, government." I don't think that's a good idea. Consider Hong Kong, for example. Hong Kong started with then governor, I think his name was Alexander Graham. He was a British colonial governor from 47 to 57 for 10 years. And he is the man unsung hero of Hong Kong's prosperity. What he did was, hey, this is a very poor fishing village, more or less, teeming with refugees from communist China. The place has no natural resources, nothing. Nothing is going for it. What do we do about it? And what he did was, he's a Scottish guy. So he said, well, I'm going to apply Scottish economist Adam Smith's idea of free market. Let's say fair. Let's play, the government should be in the background. No tariff, minimum tax, and let the business prosper. And indeed, business sector took the lead. and government was in the background and make sure that the rule of law is applied. Okay, and that was the beginning of Hong Kong. So I think in 30 years, from 1950s to 1980s, the income increased by 1,000%. Can you imagine that? All of you, can you imagine your income going by the factor of 10 times in 30 years? That's amazing, huh? Not individual, but the whole, everybody in the city, you know, Hong Kong. Just tremendous prosperity, all because government was in the background rather than in the forefront. See? Another example, let's say South Korea, very prosperous now. If, Samsung Electronics, everybody knows about Samsung Electronics, right? Do you think a government started Samsung Electronics? No, it was private sector did it. What government did was, okay, what do you need to be successful? They said, well, we need more highly trained engineers. Okay, then how can I help you? All right, then we'll train smart guys, young kids, go to special school. They started KAIST or KIST and all that. And all those smart people will be exempt from military service. Everybody was conscripted back then. And you're exempted from that. You just study, okay? We'll actually pay you stipend and everything. So these kids become very smart and become engineers and all that. So government's role was to train lots of people, have a pool of highly trained engineers, so that Samsung can draw upon this pool and then build all these things for the world. So it was Samsung doing all the business, but okay, government is in the background, help you succeed, see? Same thing with Singapore, if you will. Singapore, you think that it is government telling people do this, do that. No. Well, they tell you not to smoke, not to chew gums in the street. That they do. But basically, the idea is, how do you help business become successful? So their role is not the people telling other businesses what to do, but rather, hey, I want business to be successful. What can we do as a government to make you become more successful? Okay. So many people think of, let's say Chinese model. Somebody smart in the Beijing will tell people what to do. That thing doesn't work, I don't think. Russia tried that, it didn't work, see? It is the business sector who is taking initiative, and government, they do all they can to support the business. So one of the things government can do in Guam is, hey, somehow we can lower income tax, lower gross revenue tax, and all that. Gross revenue tax, I think Guam can do that. The government can do that, especially, for the businesses. Let's say new business comes to Guam and they do business with entities outside of Guam. So they are generating revenue from outside of Guam. Hey, if I were governor or political leader, I'll say, levy no tax to corporations. Even then, it is good, because if new business come to Guam and they hire people, and residents of Guam are making high income, have a high paying jobs, then they are better off. Okay, so all these young kids, I have students in my senior class, they graduate and have a nice job. And then that's great. So that in itself is good. So the government doesn't get any money. Okay, fine. But even then, all these people who are getting paid well, they pay income tax. Okay, then government of Guam can get income tax from the individuals who are making money now. Okay, so government of Guam can still get some money indirectly. So it is better for everybody. So let the business prosper. Don't try to levy tax on corporate income tax or gross revenue tax, whatever. Just stay in the back and help private sectors prosper. And as they prosper, the residents of Guam will prosper. And that's good. I think Guam is a wonderful place. I think Guam is heaven on earth. I look at the Tuman Bay every day, and every sunset every day. I say, this is heaven on earth. This is the wonderful place. We don't have to have 1 million tourists come here and have a pollution everywhere. We can have businesses generating a lot more revenue. So anyhow, so to make my whole thing short, by changing our thoughts on who we are, recognizing potential that we have, I think we can become that. You know? I think especially young people, you know, what they think about is what they become eventually, right? I think Tiger Woods, when he was growing up, he was thinking about nothing but golf, I think. I don't think he was thinking about basketball or music. And he became the world best golfer, right? So if everybody thinks about new identity, new potential for Guam, then I think Guam will become that, you know? And I think there's great timing, especially now that Hong Kong is losing its role as an international finance center, because they lost that rule of law thing, right? Because mainland China is now taking over Hong Kong, and rule of law is the thing of the past. Now Hong Kong is gone. Now the race is on to replace Hong Kong, and I think Guam can selectively invite some business to domicile in this wonderful place. And that'll be great for the residents of Guam, especially the young kids graduating from college. Okay, thank you very much. Unless you have questions, I'll wrap it up.
I know you do have to move on because you have a class waiting for you,
Right,
but I
right.
wanted to comment really quickly on developing Guam as an international business center is a very intriguing idea. I lived in Singapore, and I know how they made that a very business-friendly place. And you talked a little bit about how we need to lower the cost of doing business here, and in particular, lowering the tax system. Guam does mirror the US tax system, and our legislature has had the ability for many years now to come up with our own tax system, but we have not, I don't know if it's the lack of political will, but we've never really done anything to change that. And so maybe if there's political leaders listening in right now, they can.
I think there's always to get around the rule. You know, if we give some kind of exemptions, for example, without changing the tax structure, corporate income tax rate and all that, or leave it alone. We just allow special exemptions. Let's say for all the revenue earned outside of Guam is exempt from tax, or any expenditure on paying employees in Guam will be used, will give a tax credit for the amount you spend on employees in Guam, you know, that kind of thing. So effectively, you can reduce a tax rate without altering, you know, everything else. You know, so there are ways to do it. It is just a matter of the will. You know, and this is in the sense, because of the pandemic, it could be an opportunity in the sense that if it forces people to come up with an innovative solution. See, because of this pandemic, because of this adverse economic impact, we are forced to come up with an innovative solution. Well, then that's an opportunity. This is a good thing, you know, a blessing in disguise. But if we just complain about, oh, gee, tourists are not here, Jesus, then it's not going to be very helpful, right? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kenneth Choi. Appreciate your time. All right, moving on now. Our next speaker is going to talk about diversifying the Marianas one tech at a time. Franklin P. Ariola is the CEO of Menhalum LLC, a B2B and B2G database applications developer. He's also a client management lead for ARI Limited, a professional advisory services firm with clients in the US and the CNMI. He was educated at Colgate and USC. Mr. Ariola also served as the chief of staff to former Governor Eddie Calvo from 2011 to 2015. Frank is also the founder of the Primo Series, Pacific Region Initiative Market Opportunities in the Marianas, a virtual roadshow to entice USA-based tech companies to locate operations centers in the CNMI and Guam. Nice to see you, Frank. The floor is yours.
Hey, Nestor, good morning. Good to see you again. Very busy on the news as well as helping Docomo host this very important event. Good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be here. My name is Franklin Ariola, as Nestor mentioned. I'm the CEO of Manhattan LLC. And what we do on that one is we specialize in database application development. As an example, our most recent product is it's called the Guam Realtor Research GRPR application. And what that does is we take the various public information and we put them into an application which realtors and brokers can use to identify lands, properties, condominiums, valuations, zoning, et cetera, et cetera. And so on the one hand, that's what we do on the Manhattan side. On the ARI side, we were recently involved in a competitive RFP in the CNMI to provide professional advisory services to the CNMI government. It's an OEA-funded award funded by the Department of Defense. And as I try to wrap it around for you, see why it's significant. These teams are both significant and how it really comes together with the three prior speakers and how we're able to incorporate our program in there. Yeah, next, let me just get my slides moving here. Okay, so my title is, of my event is Diversifying the Marianas One Tech at a Time. Let me see here, right. Okay, it's a little lag there. So I'll give you a little background of the timeline and the target markets of what we've done and how it's really interesting how we talk about diversification on Guam and the CNMI, and how our program is kind of a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of where we're at today. So as we all know, the Marianas has talked quite a bit about diversification for a number of years now. I think even before the pandemic came about, I think a lot of us always spoken about that. We knew that, of course, there's the military buildup, the military spending on the one hand. On the other hand, we had our visitor industry, which both very, very robust. Fast forward to late last year, early this year, COVID-19 hits. Our tourism industry is gone, and so now we're really we're in almost emergency mode to get other industries squared up in order to diversify. So give you a timeline. Around June 2018, our group, ARI, identified an interest in that RFP in the CNMI. Again, it's the Department of Defense Professional Advisory Services contract. So we decided we're going to apply for that particular grant. Along the way, the executive team and myself thought about that if we should be successful, that how are other ways that we can help the CNMI government in standing up and providing more of a secure industries within the community. And as you all know, they relied on the casino out there for a number of years, but that also has gone belly up as well. And so we knew clearly that there was going to be some issues and there would be some challenges to try to sustain the CNMI economy. So on that regard, in the mid part of 2019, we approached a cybersecurity company based in Colorado in the United States. And we said, listen, we're coming out to Saipan. We expect to participate in this RFP. We think we can be pretty successful. As we move along, we'd like to also try and move other companies out into the CNMI with us as well. And so that company called IntelliSecure, it's from June 2019 to January 2020, within 6 months, they were able to ramp up and set up operations in the CNMI to complement their secure operation centers in London and in Colorado. And what they do is their primary business is in the cybersecurity data protection business. And so they stood up their shop in January of this year. They started up with a general manager. They started up with 5 or 6 employees, which was trained locally in the CNMI area by a 501c3 named Lalani Training Academy, right? So we knew that it was important for IntelliSecure to be staffed up. Number one. Number two, it was our responsibility to get them, to assist them in that regard. And so how that kind of came around is, so as we did the IntelliSecure guys set up, and then ARI now, we were officially notified that we were successful in securing that RFP with OEA, right? And so around that time frame, myself and the leadership with ARI decided, you know what, we've developed this proof of concept with IntelliSecure. They're out operating in the CNMI. And what we wanted to do was a forum similar to what you're seeing this morning, where we would get in front of us decision makers from USA-based cybersecurity and data protection companies. So they would also be interested, potentially interested, and entice them to relocate or locate some of their secure operating centers into the CNMI. And so that was in May, that was the idea. We got our award from OEA formally in August in 2020. And then in October 16th, with Docomo being a main name sponsor for this event, we launched the Primo in the Marianas event, which stands for Pacific Rim Initiative, Market Opportunities in the Marianas. So we refer to it internally as Primo 1. So we had that in October, on October 16th. We had about 75 people in attendance in that virtual forum. And we have a number of different companies leaning forward to locate or relocate some of their SOCs either in the CNMI and or Guam. So what was the impetus behind that? So, you know, all of us in our ARI, our executive team, we all have either an interest or true experience in the IT business. I was born and raised in the telecom business back right after college in the mid to late 80s. And I've always taken a special interest in telecommunications as well as IT. So we thought one of the things, you know, do we want to open up a call center perhaps? Well, the competition is pretty fierce with the Philippines, Bangkok, et cetera, right? And so we thought one of the clean industries that I refer to as clean, I'm not sure if Dr. Shelton would agree with me on this, but we look at information technology as a clean industry, right? All you're moving is digits. You're moving data. You're not bringing in any kind of trash or waste product. It's straight, it's digits, right? And so we wanted to focus on that area. And even zooming more closely, we felt that as some of the things that a previous speaker had mentioned, they're talking about cybersecurity and data protection. In this industry, what you want to do is it's one of two things. Either you're moving and protecting data or you're moving and protecting money, right? And so that's clean. It runs through the fiber optic cables that I think Mr. Zaif mentioned. And so that's what we looked at. That's how we identified which potential companies are we going to look forward to. Guys like Cyflare, Secure Cloud. There's a bunch of other web-based internet companies that are leading forward again to set up shop either in the CNMI or the Marianas. The advantages and benefits. I think Mr. Choi mentioned a couple things, right? And they're all right here, as you can see. Big thing, and Raya mentioned this in her, where she said, you know, government should lead the charge. Dr. Choi took the opposite, the 180 on that, and said, well, the private sector. And I think really that just depends on what country you live in, right? Some are more government centric and some are more private sector centric. But in this case, in the CNMI, Governor Torres gave us his full support. We had our virtual forum at 0500 in the morning CNMI time. The governor was awake. He provided a welcoming speech and provided his personal support to all those companies who we were talking to. Number one. Number two, American Asia. We all heard that frame. Well, as Dr. Choi mentioned, it's the rule of law, right? And when you're moving information, as you all know, data, money, right? You want to make sure that stuff is protected by the rule of law that all American companies must abide by. And so in the CNMI and Guam, we have that. The tax incentives, opportunity zones, capital gains incentives for those with a lot of money in the States. There's a qualifying certificate program. And as Dr. Choi mentioned, the income tax structure in the CNMI and in Guam, in many cases, is better than what you see in the CONUS. Labor attractiveness, prevailing wages, much lower. And that impacts really on what we call the 24/7 follow the sun model, right? On the East Coast of the United States, if you're going to pay a programmer or a developer, overtime wages, after 8 o'clock p.m. to 6 o'clock in the morning, that's time and a half at $30 an hour, right? Following the sun, when they're closed on the East Coast, here in the CNMI and Guam, our work day has just begun. And so you have the lower prevailing wage. And so your cost of doing business that Dr. Choi mentioned, it comes all together there. Finally, turnkey setup services. You have to be aggressive. And this is where I'll loop in some of the things there, what Raya had mentioned. And that's that exponential thinking. That's that confidence and that optimism you have to have in your jurisdiction. And that's something that I think certainly me and my team, if you were able to sit in some of our executive meetings, you would hear the confidence that we all have in Guam and the CNMI, no question about it, number one. Number two, and then you have to have that infrastructure that Zaif mentioned, right? And Docomo being one of our partners, certainly in Saipan, when we set up the IntelliSecure program in the Saipan, we had Docomo put in fiber into the building to accommodate that infrastructure. And clearly, Zaif's overall picture of the 5G Docomo universe will definitely sustain whatever Guam and CNMI is going to put together as we move forward to this diversification program and project. So, and of course, Dr. Choi mentioned clearly that the rule of law is important, follow the sun model is important, the tax incentives, and then, who's going to lead? Is it the private sector, the public sector? I think the public sector has to provide the support necessarily, but I would argue that you allow private companies really to do their thing, because they're the ones who are driven by obviously the profit motive, and certainly they're, in my opinion, a lot better at cost containment, right? And so you put in those two factors, they're able to navigate the waters, but once they have that government support, I think the two can work together so that we were able to diversify our economy. Because in my opinion, having been in the governor's office and back in the private sector, we're at a major crossroads, and this is no joking around. People are fearful of what's going to happen in the next couple of months and ahead. But again, we're very optimistic and we're very confident about Guam and the CNMI. Certainly with these sorts of events that Docomo puts together, I think it's going to be very positive and optimistic for our islands in the Marianas. So with that, I know I went real quickly because I know we're a little bit behind time. I'm very respectful of your time. I know there's some people out there. And so if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them now.
All right, Frank. Yeah, we do have one question, if you could take this real quick. With Guam historically being a tourist destination, a large part of the labor force is trained within the service industry. With a transformation to a technology digital hub to support financial, tech, and emerging industries, how do you propose we pivot so that the local labor force can be trained? If we are unable to do this, we will need to attract skilled labor from other areas. As we see within the technology and medical sectors, this could be a challenge for international businesses thinking about setting up shop on Guam.
Fantastic question. I kind of focus on that word pivot. And frankly, I don't think you have to pivot, to be frank with you. Oh gosh, I just walked right into that one. In the CNMI, we have the Northern Marianas College, and we also have Laddie Training Academy. On Guam, we have, of course, the University of Guam. We have the Guam Community College, who I've reached back to in terms of their setup. And let me just focus on GCC for a little bit. That organization, they're very progressive, and they're always leaning forward, and they're very aggressive in making sure that they can adapt and pivot, as you say, to provide training for these sorts of new skills. And you're correct. The bulk of those people who are looking for jobs are in the service industry. That's not to say that we can't train them and skill them up for jobs in the IT business. I can tell you this. We had some people in Saipan. We had them trained up. We had them CompTIA certified, and now they're working gainfully with IntelliSecure in the CNMI. That being said, IntelliSecure is now leaning over into the Guam side. They want to see now, they want to take it to the next level in terms of what sorts of human resources are available on Guam and how they can use the Guam as another platform in which to expand their business. So yeah, it's a great question, but it's here. We've got UOG, we have GCC, we have the people. You know, we just need to, you know, get behind it, have more groups, bring in new IT companies and diversification in that regard, because our people are here. And I think you're right. It's a matter of just training them up and getting the proper skills, and I think we'll be fine.
All right, thanks. Frank Ariella. Thank you, Frank. Appreciate your time. Moving on now, our next topic is powering green economy for a sustainable future. Dr. Austin Shelton is a marine and environmental scientist serving as an assistant professor and the director of the University of Guam Center for Island Sustainability and Sea Grant. Shelton is an Obama leader and one of 50 under 40 emerging leaders in the government of Guam. He is working to revive island ecosystems and advance the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Together with the Office of the Governor, he co-chairs Guam Green Growth, the island's most comprehensive action plan ever created to achieve a sustainable and prosperous future. Afade, Dr. Shelton, the floor is yours.
Afade, everybody. Thank you. Afade, Nestor, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I was reading a book recently about economics, and I came across a story that the author said was pretty common in the Middle East, where, of course, one of the main industries is oil. And Raya may say that no one ever says this, but anyway, here it goes. My father rode a camel. I drive a Mercedes-Benz. My son drives a Range Rover. His son will drive a Range Rover, but his son will ride a camel again. This story highlights the importance of economic diversification. When all the oil runs out, or better yet, it becomes stranded assets because it's just not as profitable as harnessing renewables, what will come next? Do we simply run out of money, or are we ready to fall forward into the new economy? What happens if Guam's tourism industry ever came to an end for good one day? What happens if there are no more CARES Acts? The spigot of federal funding gets turned off. What if COVID is only the beginning and we have a consistent cycle of pandemics, super typhoons, flooding, droughts, and other climate impacts? We just had a new Guam climate report released last week, and some of these things are the new reality. My great-grandfather rode in a Carabao cart. My grandfather drove a Chevy, my father drove a Jeep. I happen to drive a Prius. Maybe my children will drive Nissan Leafs or electric Hyundai Konas, hopefully. But maybe their kids will be riding in a Carabao cart again one day. Now, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing to start riding Carabaos again. Traditions are important. Embracing our island values and unique island way of life is critical. But our people are used to living in the 21st century. And to thrive in modern times, while the world is changing, we must change and adapt too. In 2020 and the years to come, we'll hear it over and over again that sustainability is more important than ever. The good news is that sustainability isn't just about sacrifice anymore. It's about opportunity. If we get ahead of opportunities in new industries like green economic growth, we can even prosper in a sustainable future. It's really important to be having this discussion today about diversifying our economy in 2021. And I'm really happy to be talking about powering a green economy for a sustainable future. Social and economic theorist Jeremy Rifkin wrote that industrial revolutions have three things in common. There are new means of communication, new sources of energy, and new modes of transportation that can change the whole world. So in the first industrial revolution, there were steam-powered printing presses that started up communications. Then there was the telegraph, use of cheap coal, and even the invention of locomotives, which was the steam engine going onto rails. In the second industrial revolution, we had centralized electricity and the telephone. Later, radio and television came in. Cheap oil led to cars, buses, and trucks getting onto roads. Now a third industrial revolution is unfolding with the convergence of three pivotal technologies And this is kind of what Zaif was talking about in those societal changes. But in the third industrial revolution, these are the three pivotal technologies that are unfolding now. There is the ultra-fast 5G communication internet, right? And we heard about that a little bit ago. There's the renewable energy internet coming up, and a mobility internet for driverless, shared, and emission-free transportation. All that will be connected over the Internet of Things, embedded across society and in the environment. So Rifkin, this theorist, goes on to point out that the reason there have been GDP growth slowing, the reason that GDP has been slowing all over the world is because productivity has been declining for the past 20 years. It already peaked 10 to 15 years ago in larger developed countries because growth has been tied to that second industrial revolution. So to kickstart growth now, we need to dive into the emerging third industrial revolution. And the key to this is setting up the new infrastructure that's required. And this is something that Guam can take advantage of now. The key is to get ahead of it and ensure that new infrastructure is set up. And I think we are getting started, right? So Docomo has 5G. The other telecommunications companies, I'm sure, are working on bringing this to Guam as well. We have a new renewable energy law that was authored by Senators Shelton and Rigel and signed by Governor Leon Guerrero last year. Public Law 35-46 mandates 50% renewable energy production here in Guam by 2035 and 100% renewable energy by 2045. We're the first US island territory to do this, and only a small handful of states have enacted similar laws. We have some electric vehicles on island, rideshare with Stroll Guam, but very few at this time, public electric vehicle charging stations. Some good news is that the Guam Regional Transit Authority recently received a $9.5 million grant to purchase electric buses and set up solar charging infrastructure. GRTA is planning to eventually set up a park and ride in Dedido for northern residents to ride the buses into Manila to GCC and UOG. Now this is pretty exciting because we may be able to get dozens or even a couple hundred cars off the road each day, reducing congestion and the burning of gasoline. Guam, I think, has had a few industrial revolutions of our own. So the first people, our ancestors, settled here. They found their way to Guam from Southeast Asia 3,500 to 4,000 years ago using the ancient science of celestial navigation. They set up agriculture, fishing. They were able to transport goods around the island and around the region with proas and sacraments. And then came Spanish contact. We had a global trade connection now with the Spanish galleons. We had access to metals and other goods. Pigs, deer, carabao were introduced to the island. Then we became a US colony. We received eventually US citizenship and had the ability to travel around the world on airplanes. We receive federal aid today. We're able to create new industries in government and military spending, and of course, tourism. And while many appreciate the perceived military and economic security this latest industrial revolution provides for Guam, unfortunately, we also have stark vulnerabilities that have been clearly exposed during this pandemic. Our food and economy are almost completely dependent on outside sources. We import at least 90% of all food and goods we consume. We import fossil fuels to move our vehicles and generate electricity. Tourists fly in to drive our economy. And while food and oil supply chains fortunately did not break down during the pandemic, we did lose our tourists, at least for now. At present, our economy is being held up by Federal CARES Act funding, and expiring next month, our economy will again be at the mercy of Congress. Control of our economy and our destiny is not being held in our hands. So how do we reclaim control of our economy in the 21st century? How can we take advantage and join in the third industrial revolution and cultivate our own new local industrial revolution? First, we need to look for pathways to a sustainable future. And here is one way we're currently doing that in Guam. In September, we adopted the Guam Green Growth Action Framework, the island's most comprehensive action plan ever created to achieve a sustainable future. Our University of Guam Center for Island Sustainability is facilitating this island-wide process along with the governor, the governor's office, and 97 working group members representing all sectors of society, from government, private business, academia, and nonprofits. And Guam Green Growth is aligned with the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. In 2015, the UN member states adopted these goals, which are intended to achieve a prosperous, equitable, and sustainable future for the world by 2030. And G3, or Guam Green Growth, will lead the implementation of these goals in locally and culturally effective ways. This is really our island strategy to building back better, fairer, and more resilient. But now let's think about some of our current impediments to sustainability. What is currently making us vulnerable? Two of our biggest sustainability challenges are, first, the reliance on imports. As I mentioned, we import over 90% of our goods and fossil fuels. And the second thing is that we have an overproduction of waste. There are only so many holes that we can dig in the ground and fill with trash before we run out of space. In 2019, GovGuam sold a $30 million bond to fund the construction of a new cell in the Ladson landfill that may only hold us over until 2030 before it fills up. When we don't make our own food or control our own industries, we put ourselves at risk. We are vulnerable to global disruptions. Food, energy, and waste. These are the three prime areas I think that are ripe for Guam, green economic growth in Guam. Food, energy, and waste. We can produce food through expanded agriculture and aquaculture industries. We can achieve 100% renewable energy and have zero emission transportation. And thirdly, we can reduce and eliminate waste through the creation of new circular industries. And what do we need for these things? For food production, we've seen organizations like Farm to Table, UOG's Cooperative Extension and Outreach, Triton Farm, Guahan Sustainable Culture, great organizations stepping up during this pandemic to ensure that people were getting access to locally grown and nutritious food. They connected with farmers and the co-op to make sure that there was demand, supply, connections to the community. And more can be done to stimulate demand and increase production for locally grown food. And so much to do with smart agriculture that Zaif mentioned briefly, that there can be sensors in the soil for nutrients and water saturation. On the aquaculture front at UOG, there's great success in this new story about a public-private partnership that we have for the aquaculture hatchery. And we're finally getting these scientifically cutting-edge disease-free shrimp onto the local market that you can buy at the Fisherman's Co-op. And now through our UOG Sea Grant program, we'll be setting up aquaponics demonstrations on campus and around the island that people can adopt this model for their small businesses and backyards. And this week, we're submitting a new grant proposal, I think tomorrow, to explore ocean aquaculture opportunities for the island. For the second thing, renewable energy production, the International Energy Agency just released a report last week, and even with the pandemic, renewable energy capacity is increasing 4% this year globally. And next year, there will be a 10% increase. By 2025, they project that renewables will account for 90% of all new electricity capacity. This means that solar and wind capacity can overtake natural gas by 2023 and overtake coal by 2024. The Guam Power Authority currently has 25 megawatts of renewable energy generation capacity. Within the next 3 years, they will have 106 megawatts of additional solar, which will bring our renewable energy portfolio to about 25 or 30%. So we still have a long way to go to reach the 100% renewable energy mandate before 2045. And thus, it's a great economic opportunity for the island. Every dollar we prevent from going off island to import fossil fuels means more money stays in our local economy. And this is, there's a lot of opportunity for more private generation of renewable energy, commercial and household rooftop solar, and distributing this renewable generation capacity with smart grid technology will make our power system more resilient as well. And part of the economic growth will come from building and upgrading to energy efficient buildings, upgrading to that smart power grid. The economic benefits will come from the infrastructure upgrades and potentially lots of new green jobs. And then the third thing I mentioned, waste, circular economy. So right now we're living in what's called the linear economy. That means our economy is a line that starts with our goods arriving by ship or boat at our ports. And the end of the line is when all these associated waste products are buried in the landfill forever. So we need to bend this line into a circle. And by transitioning to a circular economy, we will design out waste and pollution, keep materials in use, and regenerate natural systems. To reduce and eliminate waste through the creation of new circular industries, the Guam Green Growth Initiative is currently working to open a G3 circular economy makerspace and innovation hub at the Chamorro Village. And so this effort will take us beyond trash cleanups here on island by developing solutions to waste issues. It will work to create new jobs and new green industries and turn waste into cash instead of landfills with trash. At the Chamorro Village Makerspace, entrepreneurs will be able to gather in a place filled with tools and equipment to transform waste products into marketable products. 3D printers, laser cutters, CNC routers, heat presses that can turn discarded banana trees into wallets, plastics into new tiles, bricks, and trinkets, beetle net palms into plates to offset styrofoam, discarded lumber into tables or trophies, and so much more. So partners like the UOG School of Business and Public Administration, GITA, the GUMA Business Incubator, the Small Business Development Center will be on board to help these entrepreneurs achieve success in the business world. And as an innovation hub, we will host workshop classes, drive collaboration through connections worldwide, become an affiliate of international networks like ASU RISN and MIT's Fab Labs, where we will be connected in real time to other innovation hubs. So in a time of business closures and rising unemployment, this Guam Green Growth Initiative will give people an ownership role of the new green economy and the transition to a cleaner and more sustainable future. So again, food, energy, and the circular economy, I think, are 3 areas of growth in our next industrial revolution. And so I just want to wrap up with my final thought is that while I'm hoping that my grandkids won't actually be forced to be traveling in carabao carts one day, I could see myself enjoying a future where I load up my pet carabao in a trailer, hitch it to my hopefully Tesla truck, and head to the ranch for the weekend where I let the carabao out to mow the grass. I set up irrigation lines to later be controlled by my smartphone over the Internet of Things. And so that would be sort of a dream for me. But what's important as we plan out the next steps for our economy is that we make sure we will achieve a sustainable future. Only then can we ensure that our home is a resilient island where our people can thrive. Thank you very much.
Just want to let you know that I love the camel carabao analogy. We do have to move on, but you are, of course, one of the leading voices in a green and sustainable economy, and it's good to hear that. I don't think you find that inconsistent with the technology-driven proposals that the previous speakers had mentioned. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, our next topic, innovating connectivity in the new norm. Sharon Cassidy is a Guam-based sales and marketing professional who specializes in Pacific Rim business development and project management. In her current role as the Director of Carrier Relations for Docomo Pacific, she oversees the carrier wholesale and roaming segments of the company. Heavily involved with development and strategic opportunities, she works closely with technical teams in expanding Docomo Pacific capabilities and markets. Please welcome Sharon Cassidy. Good morning, Sharon.
Good morning, Esther. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad, and I guess I get the honor to wrap up all these innovative speakers that we had today. I've got notes written all over the place of just how everything kind of ties in. And I guess with all their ideas and the discussions of the infrastructure and how it's so important to connectivity, it's a perfect lead into what I do. As a Director of Carrier Relations, I always get to say that I get to do the fun stuff. I get to be part of the building and the network and part of 5G in some ways, just because of the infrastructure and the roads that are built underneath to support it is kind of my wheelhouse. So I'll go ahead and I can go ahead and take over, right? Let's just see, maybe I've got a lag here. So I've kind of gonna just highlight the whole infrastructure piece of it. I think with every single presentation that we had, we were talking about the importance of connectivity. And I think we've all experienced this over the last 10 months with the lockdowns and having to now kind of transition from being at the office and now being at home. And it's not just us as businesses, it's the kids as well, right? Teachers have had to have a new way of reaching out to the children and having their education kind of transitioned over to being online at home experience. And we've seen a lot of pivots with it. You also see the Facebook and Instagram live pop-up stores happen, where I think that what Raya was talking about as far as exponential thinking and kind of breaking out of your norms and the anchors and perceptions that you have, people thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And we saw it a lot prior to, but now we're seeing it a whole lot more, from just simple things that you never thought we would be sharing online. You also have the homeschooling experience, right? You've got research being done by kids at home. They're doing their online school. They've got art projects that they're doing, and even as much as like PE, right? Making sure that they're participating in some type of physical education with the school they're in. And I think a lot of us could also say that last year, online food orders, where we call in and we have somebody deliver it out to our car, I don't think a lot of us thought that that was going to be something that was going to be real within such a short time that we had. So as we see all of this new movement towards all these new innovative way of thinking and doing business, we also need to start thinking about our infrastructure. Part of it is that, you know, as population grows in a company or on an island or in a city, we need to look at our roads. You need to make sure that you've got paving done and you don't have potholes and you're able to get to work safely. And now we're kind of moving from a physical perspective of it to more of a virtual, where we've got these highways of information because we're not leaving our homes, and we need to evaluate the amount of bandwidth that we've got access to, from being able to share it with not just ourselves, but with our children that are with us. So what does that mean for us in paving new roads? If you look at Guam from the perspective of where we're at in the Pacific, let me see if I just have a lag here. We have so much fiber optics coming through the islands. Guam, right there, kind of in the middle. I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, but we've got this great perspective of where we're at in the Pacific. We've got access to the US on the east side of us, and then our proximity to Asia, I think, kind of reflects what Dr. Choi and Frank were saying, just about, you know, having this rule of law and being able to have US law, but so close to Asia and access to those markets. This is really important because as you look at this, I don't think a lot of people realize how much undersea fiber there is just within our region. And with this, it just allows us as Guam so much more capacity and capabilities from an innovative perspective, and being able to do things from our little location, which felt so remote, but now really we are truly connected. I'm going to go on to the next one to just get a little bit closer look at what Guam is in our Pacific region. Of course, the Northern Marianas, we support them as well with our TISA cable that we've got. And they also have the capability of being able to reach all these different cable systems. And this is just kind of what's in place right now. If you listen to the markets, there's so much more happening and so many more cables that are going to be transiting through and connecting us from the east to the west. And with Guam kind of being in the middle, there's so much where it is a strategic as well as an advantageous location for all of us from a business perspective, as well as from a personal perspective. We've got so much access to these cable systems that allow us these new pathways and roads where we can go, and it's not like a bridge where you're going in one direction and you're stuck. You can now pivot and go in the other direction and still be able to reach a location. So with our capacity to be able to reach the internet in so many different ways, Guam is really a key location. I should also mention too that because we are so competitive, it's not just one carrier that's available on Guam. We've got other carriers that offer the same type of services, which is great because from the marketing perspective of it, we don't want to be one that is just stuck with one carrier in order to be able to do anything, because then you don't have that law where you're being able to be in a competitive market. So that's actually really good for us. And being an open market and carrier neutral is kind of the language that we use. It allows us to be able to provide services at a competitive level as if we were in the US or in a major market and not just a little island. And with this, there's so many opportunities. I've listed here, you can see Guam's kind of in the center, and you've got the Northern Marianas Islands. Each of the other islands, of course, have their cable system, and there are new systems that are also going to be landing in Palau, which gives them another advantage for being able to reach new markets for them as well. So this is really key as far as the fiber piece of it, and just being able to have that connectivity and be dynamic in how we look at business and not just feel like we're just stuck on our own. In the next piece, I wanted to talk about, don't just, can I go back? We shouldn't just look undersea. Looking underground it's great. Fiber has been a wonderful, innovative way of technology and being able to reach connectivity and having that bandwidth required. But we should also look up. Earlier this year, or actually earlier this week, SpaceX launched their first privately owned and privately managed space shuttle on Monday. 4 astronauts went out to the International Space Station, and it's just amazing and awe-inspiring to watch that. Raya, as she was talking through hers, I was watching her video intently because you see how much they did over the years and all the mistakes they made. And this week alone, I mean, it's just a major milestone for them to be able to take 4 astronauts on their own vehicle and take it out to the International Space Station and be successful. I think those kind of things that we're seeing, it's just absolutely amazing. But on the not so sexy front, we also have so much going on in the satellite market, which is another level of the pillar of connectivity that we have been getting into with Docomo Pacific. This year alone, we're talking about a launch of thousands of satellite dishes in the air to be able to support these low Earth orbit type of dishes that we'll be able to communicate with. And these dishes actually offer rural connectivity for all of these islands. So just thinking of only fiber as a connectivity option, I don't think is the way to go. You need to look at our other options. The satellite has been around for a long time, but this expanding market of the satellite dishes, and they're called constellations because there's so many that are going up right now. The connectivity to the remote islands with the subsea routes that are very limited, it's important to them because even if they have this, now they're going to have something that they can fall back on. So when you're looking at, we all go online now, we're shopping on Amazon, we're looking for, getting groceries, we're buying dog food, all these things that we're doing online, they're all reliant on the basic infrastructure and the connectivity to be able to do it. So the banking, in order for our transactions to clear, the shipping to be able to manage and see where our goods are, the mom and pop stores to be able to process these transactions so that they can sustain and keep moving forward. So in 2018, Docomo Pacific actually went and they made an investment. They actually purchased an existing teleport. We've refurbished it, and it's an Earth station in Polenta, Jonia. It's a very fun project that we've got. We use it actually for our ATISA backup and our Saipan and Rhoda backup should anything happen to our cable system that is going out there. We also have customers that are using it for their backup, for smaller bandwidths, and some larger ones too for connectivity for their services to their customers. So there's so much going on, and we're proud to be part of another pillar because the Guam Teleport truly is, it's just another landing station of more data opportunities and connectivity for those that are not able to have all this wonderful fiber that is going to their islands. And then just to wrap it up, I don't want to take too much time because I know we're kind of short on it, is we all need to have a strategy written out with even some of our far out ideas. What Raya was saying, just as far as exponential thinking, we should always have something drawn out, even if it's just stuff we're throwing on the wall. Everybody should have a map that they have, and this is Docomo Pacific's map. And I know this like the back of my hand. I can shout it to you with my eyes closed. But as a service provider, we're always looking for new ways and new roads to be able to provide to our customers. We want to make sure that they've got that connectivity to be able to be resilient within their network, have the redundancy that they need, and be able to protect what they are, because right now that is the way that we're being able to reach our customers and our consumers. In this map, you see that we've got our POPs, which is kind of our little way stations or truck stops within Asia. We've got our Japan POP. We've also got a couple of POPs in Hong Kong. And our POPs are our points of presence, which we have connectivity to be able to reach the rest of the world. We also have ones built out towards the east of us, which is going towards Hawaii, LA, and Palo Alto. And all of this is just for our additional redundancy for our main cores of business, which is our cable TV, our internet, being able to do connectivity with our mobile and our landlines. All of this is key for us, and that is our strategy. So although Docomo Pacific, our overall goal is to make sure that you guys are staying connected to your businesses, we want to know how can we help you be successful with your vision? And this is just kind of a snapshot of what we do here to help you.
To be frank.
To be frank.
Yeah, I was going to say that your boss, Rod Boss, to be frank, see, Ariel has got me talking like this now.
Yeah.
Has always mentioned the fact that we are very fortunate on Guam for a population of less than 200,000 to have the connectivity that we do have. And I was wondering if you could make a quick comment about that.
No, it's true. I mean, I'm actually part of the Pacific Islands Telecommunications Association, which has all the other islands involved as well. The Solomon Islands, Fiji, Cook Islands, and it's everybody within the Pacific. And as we go through kind of what our inventory is and what we've got available, I always feel blessed that we have so much connectivity. It's not just to Asia, you know, we're going down to Australia. We've got capacity going out to Hawaii. And it allows us so much as far as that strategic advantage in so many ways. And we don't see it stopping. What Frank has reiterated, everybody, Dr. Choi talking about, you know, just our proximity to Asia, but also having that stability when it comes to US law and knowing what you're getting into, that has really been like the key factors in us being a location, and it's looking good for us to have more subsea fiber that's coming out here.
All right, thanks, Sharon. Okay.
Thanks,
before we wrap up, now it's time for the Docomo Pacific Prize giveaway. We have randomly selected one attendee to receive the just launched Aura Air. That's the world's smartest air purification system that cleanses and disinfects your indoor air while vigilantly monitoring its quality in real time. Needless to say, everyone can use one of these during this pandemic. And drum roll, please, the winner. Congratulations, Lauren Swaddell. You can come down to Docomo Pacific headquarters, and if anyone else is interested, you can purchase the Aura Air exclusively at Docomo Pacific headquarters here in Tamuning starting today. All right. And we'd like to thank our speakers for their time this morning. Fascinating stuff. And thank you everyone for participating in the second Docomo Pacific Work Better Together webinar series. We hope you were able to get some valuable insights from this morning's session. We will email a link after the webinar where you'll be able to download the PowerPoint presentations. Stay tuned for more Docomo Pacific Work Better Together webinars. We look forward to seeing you very soon. I'm Nestor Lecanto. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.